Okay, we're going to get started now. So thanks to all of you for coming, and thanks for your patience in that we started late, but as you know, the last session sort of ran over. So basically, I guess I have to say that I was a bit nervous when I saw that the competing session is on blockchain, because I thought, okay, we're not going to have anyone in our room, but I think all of you made the right decision to come here, and we're going to hopefully show you that it is really important to talk about insurance. So first of all, my name's Anke Green. I'm from the Access to Insurance Initiative, and for those of you that aren't familiar with the Access to Insurance Initiative, we are the implementing arm of the International Association of Insurance Supervisors focused on inclusive insurance. So basically, we support insurance supervisors to create access to insurance. And we're all here at the Global Policy Forum because we care about financial inclusion. We think it's important. But in most cases, when we talk about financial inclusion, we are talking about the unbanked, and we talk about credit, savings, and payment systems. But we're usually not mentioning a financial service that's really important and connected to all of that, and that's insurance. But I do have to say, I was impressed this morning that there was more mention of insurance in the panels than I thought there would be, so that is encouraging. And if you think about it, it is an important financial service, because for a family living in poverty to save, say, $1,000, that could take a lifetime. And they might never be able to actually save that, because at some point, some unexpected event will happen that could happen to anyone, like sickness or death of a breadwinner or a drought. And then the family will have to deplete their savings in order to deal with that event. But if you look at insurance, then with insurance, a family can basically get immediate coverage against these events, up to $1,000 for just a few premiums, a few dollars of premium, and they don't have to invest their savings in dealing with the events, but can use them for more productive means. So there's really an important part there. So one of the best ways that insurance can be integrated into efforts to increase financial inclusion in a country is basically to include it in the national financial inclusion strategies of the countries. And to see where we stand on that, actually the Access to Insurance Initiative and AFI, we conducted a survey amongst AFI members and the insurance supervisors that the Access to Insurance Initiative works with. And we also collected some case studies from Paraguay, Papua New Guinea, Malaysia, and Tanzania to get some more insights. And these are all contained in this report on inclusive insurance and national financial inclusion strategies that we're also launching today. We're really lucky to have a very distinguished panel here today. And let me just briefly introduce them. So our theme setter is Mr. Ernesto Velázquez Argaña. He's the Deputy President of the Central Bank of Paraguay. And he'll give us an introduction on the importance of inclusive insurance and also what Paraguay has done in terms of integrating insurance into national financial inclusion strategy. And then, like Paraguay, Papua New Guinea is one of the case studies featured in the survey report. And I'd like to welcome George Awap from the Central Bank of Papua New Guinea. As you all know, Bangladesh is one of the pioneers of microfinance. But what you might not know is that Bangladesh is also one of 8 countries that have made a Maya Declaration commitment on insurance. And to speak about that, we're very honored to have the chairman of the Bangladesh Insurance Regulatory Authority with us, Mr. Shafiqur Rahman Patwari. And we'd obviously also like to hear the perspective of the private sector and the insurance industry. And so to do that, we're happy to have Mr. Igor Jurgens with us. He's the president of the All Russian Insurance Association. And then, as you're all well aware, one of AFI's priorities is to ensure that women have access to financial services. And to speak to us on how best to actually create access to insurance for women, we have Karen Miller, who's the Vice President of Knowledge and Communications at Women's World Banking. So thanks to all of you for coming. And to get us started, I'd like to hand over to Ernesto to take us through your presentation.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure for me to be here, and also it's quite a challenge because this is a complex topic and not as cool as other ones, as I mentioned, Anke. But anyway, I'll try to do my best. For us, for Paraguay, this is a very important topic because this subject was a part of the National Financial Inclusion Strategy for, I don't know, 5 years now, because we are ending now the term of the strategy. We have to write another one, and we think that the subject still deserves to be included in the new one because of all the importance and meanings of this important subject for the population of Paraguay, especially for the vulnerable population. In Paraguay, we had interesting schemes of microinsurance, and then I will explain about microinsurance that are very impressive, I would say, and very successful. One of them is Microseguro Social, which is a microinsurance for social means, I would say, and the other one is agricultural. It's an agricultural insurance. Both of them, the last one, sorry, is still as a pilot program, but it's going to be implemented in some months. But what is inclusive insurance? What is about it? What it is? This is a new concept. It emerged some 20 years ago, more or less. So I mean, it's new, you would say. It's basically insurance focused on the poor people or the underserved people of a country, I would say. And this concept is now broader because now it's called inclusive insurance. Inclusive insurance is that insurance for impoverished people, but also encompass underserved and other populations in a country. Yeah. So that's why we talk about inclusive insurance. So what about Paraguay? I was telling you about the strategy in Paraguay. It's interesting because we have a very well done, I would say, very well structured strategy. We have a committee, and we have a steering group, and then we have an executive officer, and then working groups. We have 7 team topics. One of them is insurance, and I would say almost complied with is responsibility, this working group, because almost 27% of the population now has insurance, and that's very good because our goal was 36. I mean, that's why we have to include again this subject in the new strategy. But anyway, we managed to develop these microinsurance schemes, as I mentioned, which are very successful and were part also of the strategy. So in that sense, the strategy was very positive for Paraguay. I would like to talk briefly about the 2 schemes. One of them is called the social microinsurance or Microseguro Social, which is focused on poor people. I mean, the poorest people, 10% of the population, more or less, who lives in extreme poverty, and it helps at around 13,000 people, which are 13,000 families, because these are child and youth, and also very poor people under a program called Tecopora. Both programs managed by the government, one of them by the Social Action Secretariat, and the other one by the Child and Youth Secretariat, and all the premiums are paid by the government. So, the people cannot, they don't pay anything, so it's really a success. and it covers, for instance, death risks, funeral expenses, for instance, not only for the breeder of the family, of the principal person, the father, for instance, but also for 3 more members of the family. It covers like $1,000 for the principal person of the family, and then $500 for each other person, up to 3, as I mentioned. And the other scheme is a very interesting scheme also, but more focused on agricultural insurance. This is going to serve to around 26,000 people, encompassing like 60,000 acres in 4 regions of the country. And this insurance will cost around $260, and also the beneficiaries won't have to pay anything because the government would pay for this. These basically are the schemes we have in Paraguay. I don't want to talk anymore because I know we have another people, and then Anke will ask more questions. Yeah, I'll be happy to answer later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ernesto. And also for making the distinction between microinsurance and inclusive insurance. I think that's important to mention at the outset because sometimes people are a bit confused about the various terms.
Exactly.
Yeah, also for mentioning the different areas in which
sorry, I
insurance is
didn't.
covered.
Yeah, I didn't use my.
No, but that's perfect. Thanks so much. So I was asked to briefly introduce this report that we prepared together with AFI, and because we have people here who in the countries that are represented in the report, I'm going to keep it very brief. But I did want to sort of raise a few key points. One of them being that what we found when we did our survey is that although insurance is increasingly integrated into countries' national financial inclusion strategies, it's often only integrated on a very shallow basis. So it might be mentioned somewhere, but it's not a key pillar or a specific thematic working group as it is in the case of Paraguay, for example. And the reason for that is often because there are other priorities and because there's a lack of guidance on how to actually best integrate insurance. And one of the reasons, an additional reason, is also that the diagnostic studies that are often carried out at the beginning of the strategies often don't really integrate or consider insurance very well. And obviously to have a meaningful diagnostic, the importance is to have full participation of insurance stakeholders. Initially, obviously, the supervisor, the insurance supervisor, but also insurance associations, for example. So that's something, a recommendation that comes out of the report. We also noticed that the indicators that are often used in national financial inclusion strategies, they refer to the access and to usage of the insurance, but not necessarily the quality dimension. So it's not really considered whether the insurance whether insurance in a country provides value to the consumers, and that's obviously what's important in the end, whether consumers want to use it and whether they gain value from it. So as you can see, we did find a lot of room for improvement, but I think the most important finding of the survey was that in the cases where insurance was integrated quite comprehensively into the strategies, that actually created the policy space to make some real changes in the insurance markets. So there were enabling policies that were developed, alternative distribution channels allowed, additional insurance products offered, and so basically all of this collaboration of the insurance stakeholders, the supervisor as well as industry from the beginning was really important. And as I mentioned, the report also found that there was a lack of guidance on how to integrate insurance. And so AFI's, what's the name of the group? It's the Financial Inclusion Strategy Peer Learning Group. actually decided to take that on, and they will develop guidance for AFI member countries on how best to include it. So I'd just like to leave it at that, in that you can actually find this report in the Knowledge Center at the beginning. So, and then just to get back to maybe some of the practical examples for Paraguay. So you mentioned that insurance is one of the 7 key pillars.
Exactly,
And,
yes.
And how was the insurance supervisor actually involved in developing the strategy or in implementing it?
Thank you, Anke. It was really involved because he was a part of a working group along with people from the private sector also, and Ministry of Social Action, etc. So it really was a joint venture, I would say, of the public and private sector, which was very interesting because even people from the private insurance companies participated in the working groups. That's the good thing about the strategy, because it's open also to the private sector, not only regarding insurance, but also in the other 7 areas. So that's a key point.
Thank you. And if I understand correctly, it was also, there's not just the insurance working group, but I think insurance is also somehow integrated into the other ones as
yes.
well?
Yeah, because the insurance touches other areas, as you mentioned, for instance, vulnerable population, because as I mentioned, these schemes are like social aid for the public, for the most impoverished people of the population, and also a lot about education, because this is a matter of education. I was telling, as I was telling before to Anke, the lack of conscience about the risks is really probably due in a very large sense due to the lack of education about the risks they are facing with a shock, for instance, in agriculture. I mean, if they have a huge storm or rain, they don't realize the damage that could cause and the loss they could have. So it's important to educate people. So yeah, there are other areas of the inclusion of the financial inclusion strategy that are touched by insurance. Yes, absolutely.
Great. So I think that's also.
Merci beaucoup. Je pense que c'est un point très important parce que ça concerne les questions différentes. Peut-être vous pouvez parler des bénéfices pour Paraguay de l'assurance inclusive. Je pense que c'est très difficile de travailler sans l'inclusion financière parce que c'est trop important pour les gens et les gens sont en besoin de cette assurance inclusive.
By storms, for instance. So this was really key for the economy of these people, and it's a driver of economic growth, of course, I'm sure. That's why it's so important to include insurance as a topic of any financial inclusion strategy.
Thank you. And we'll get back to this point on the joint venture between the public and the private sector later on. I think that's really important as well. Now I'd like to turn to another case study country, so Papua New Guinea, and as well to a technology that's been used in many countries to scale insurance. So George, the report notes that the expansion of mobile insurance in Papua New Guinea was actually, it had an impact on the national financial inclusion strategy. And I'm not sure if everyone in the audience is familiar with mobile insurance. Most people, when they hear the term for the first time, they think it's sort of insurance if your phone gets stolen or bursts into flames or something like that. So that's not what we're talking about. So maybe you could sort of explain what mobile insurance is, what Papua New Guinea's experience has been with that, and basically how it's influenced the national financial inclusion strategy.
Thank you, Anke. I think when we're talking about microinsurance, we are not talking about mainstream insurance, It's to do with the vulnerable already. And I think the theme for the summit is very, very useful for us: innovation, inclusion, and impact. And this is what I'm seeing from microinsurance from the PNG perspective. Talking about microinsurance, it requires a lot of players in this. Like you're correctly saying, it's private dialogue is very important, partnership. It's no one man's thing. That's one thing I've also said. But in terms of the BIMA, we have BIMA. It's known for doing insurance business around the globe. Now, we went into a partnership with Pacific Financial Inclusion Program to do a study for us in PNG to assess the viability of potential microinsurance in PNG and what would be the best methods to use. From the study, it was revealed that there was potential for microinsurance. And PNG, when you talk about Papua New Guinea, it's got a very rough geographic terrain. And moving from one city to another is by air or by sea. So those are the complexities that we have. And to do traditional concept insurance is almost not going to happen. So we need technology to partner with and to make penetration into microinsurance. In the roughest parts of the country, you really need new technology to go into that area. With the liberalization of the telecommunication industry, we had the entry of new players in the market, and that established the platforms that's necessary for mobile banking. With mobile banking, we realized that the take-up in mobile banking was going very, very quickly. About 60-70% of penetration was already there. But then the usage for mobile banking, the penetration was a bit low, 20-30%. But with mobile banking or microinsurance, you need financial education to a largely illiterate population. So those were our challenges that we faced. But with BIMA partnering with the telco company and an insurance underwriter, this became possible. And that's why I'm saying private-public partnership is key to microinsurance aspirations in geographies that are similar to ours, where movement of cash is difficult. And to reach isolated communities, you need technology. You cannot just go in there think that you can deliver insurance, because it's going to be a difficult challenge. So it is simple. What's happened is that BIMA, together with the telco company, Digital, BIMA went and trained some of the digital guys and talked to them, and simply to talk, and for them to talk to their customers, and then customers simply subscribe. And we're talking about smaller amounts of premiums, very small amounts. In a sense, like in your sense, it's a quarter or a dime. That's what we're talking about in terms of premium per day, to make up to some $15 of insurance premium by the end of the month.
And can I just ask what types of insurance products were covered through this channel?
Yeah, in this, that's life insurance. The first one was life insurance, family life. It's meant for the family because if somebody dies or passes on, then the other family member can go and make the claim. So that's why it's a bit consumer-centric in that way. Sometimes you take up an insurance policy, but you don't know where the policy papers, and it's difficult to locate it, even if the guy passes on. So I see that the family life is important because the family is aware of that and they can make the claim easily. And the other is the AUSIC. AUSIC is the general insurance on Medicare, so which is quite useful. But the take-up was very, very strong initially when it was introduced. But people are trying to test the market to find out whether it's useful for them or not. And it was very strong, and we had about 600,000 policyholders along the line, because it's also a part of a learning process, and learning curve. For some, you will expect, it's a natural expectation, some will drop out because they're only trying it for the first time. It's a new product. Some will fall out, some will be on, and then you have to look at the crop seasonality, because sometimes their incomes are influenced by crop seasonality and income. So they have a lot of influence. But as the good thing with BIMA is that BIMA is able to adjust for the delay in payments to ensure continuity. There are ways it is done to manage some delayed or deferred payments, and then sometimes when they pay it up later on, or when they pay for the mobile phone top-ups, then it starts to deduct again. So it's a very simple process, because by the time they list you, your information is sent to the BIMA office, and then you get a text message saying that you've been subscribed to be on the Medicare or the micro insurance program with BIMA for family insurance or medical insurance. And that's very, very interesting. And claims have also been made. And for claims, you have to get the necessary documents. If there is a debt, you get the documents and you go to the BIMA office and then you make your claim. That's just the area where BIMA needs to really do a lot of work in, because you need to bring the service to the people, not necessarily for them to come up to the nearest agent. How they will bring that claim part of it to the remote segments of the population, that's a challenge for BIMA itself and the insurers. But insurance was actually never like what I do confirm what you're saying, is that it was never part of a bigger agenda on our financial inclusion strategy. We were looking at financial literacy and savings and other things in the process, but once we had this case study going, the research going, and then when we tried it, it was overwhelmingly subscribed, and we had over 600,000 policyholders, and in time we know that it's going to pick up again, because we really have not gone into financial literacy education on microinsurance. The people are doing trial and error process themselves. But when we step in, we have to step in to teach them about these things properly. And that, from outside, we've not done it yet. That's on BIMA and the products. But in terms of regulation, the central bank has, we tend to embrace technology. We're looking for technological innovation because of the rugged terrains that we have and vastness of the area. We want technology. Now, when it came to mobile phone banking, we went into regulation quickly because we were already aware of the issues around the world in terms of exclusivity. We wanted to prevent exclusivity, and we wanted to ensure or improve interoperability. And whilst at the same time we wanted to ensure consumer protection. And that's why we were quick to bring regulations on mobile phone banking. And we licensed non-bankers, and because we wanted to have bank-led models and not non-bank models. So, but in the end, we ended up having both bank-led and non-bank-led models were all implemented in PNG, and we found that everything has a space for itself, and that was beauty about it. But regulation is only to do with ensuring that playing fields are level and not necessarily to disadvantage the other party. And we realized that in terms of microinsurance, we've not gone in there because the players already are licensed institutions, and they're trialing a product. We're just watching them and make sure that we encourage you to do what you're doing, but provide regular reports to us. There's no point in stamping regulations on this microinsurance business SLE, because regulation is very heavy. Regulation can kill them. So you have to be very mindful when you're trying to impose regulations on microinsurance. It's not going to even scratch, or it's not going to hurt the system. So we are allowing that to happen, and we are watching very closely.
Good. Thank you so much, George. I think you've touched upon so many issues in what you just said. I mean, we first of all had the link between the AFI theme, the innovation and inclusion and impact, and how basically partnerships between mobile insurance companies, third-party operators, and insurance companies can really drive and scale insurance and allow insurance companies to reach remote areas, that it can be a form of financial education, basically for the people to do some trial and error with that, and then the role of the regulator to allow this trial and error. So I'm sure that we'll get back to some of these topics in the discussions later on. Thank you so much. That was really very helpful. And now I'd like to turn to Bangladesh. As I said before, you're one of only 8 countries that have made a Maya Declaration commitment on insurance. Just for those of you that are interested, the other countries are Burundi, El Salvador, Nigeria, Peru, Timor-Leste, Samoa, and Zimbabwe. So, Mr. Patwari, can you explain a bit more what specifically this commitment is on and what has been achieved so far?
Thank you. My organization in Bangladesh, known as Bangladesh Insurance Development Regulatory Authority Bangladesh, it's not that old, it's almost 7 years old. It was created in 2011. And after that, we are formulating many rules and regulations. It's still going on. We have to formulate more regulations and more rules to enhance the activities of the insurance sector. And by this time, we also have a World Bank project to strengthen the insurance sector, and also we are doing work on this. But particularly, we are signatory on Maya Declaration, and to achieve that, we are doing many things for the insurance sector so that we can achieve the goal of Maya Declaration. As for example, we are adopting a good number of activities so that we can reach to the low-income group and middle-income group through financial inclusion. And we are doing that, and through that, we have undertaken many sort of like health insurance, crop insurance, livestock insurance, insurance for the expected labor, education insurance in the school for students. So we have many programs, but we have to implement those in future, and we are doing in that way. And as you said that we have this year become the member of AFI, and this year we are only attending AFI program. And from there, they wanted a commitment for another 1 or 2 commitment for Maya Declaration. So we already sent a commitment that I want to disclose here about the Bangladeshi people who are working outside Bangladesh. About them, we are going to cover them, and they are all the workers. We will bring them under the insurance coverage within 2-3 years. Our people are working Malaysia, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, and these workers are contributing to the development of our economy by foreign remittance. And IDRA has initiated a program to bring those workers under insurance coverage. In case of death, accident, layoff, or any kind of unemployment, they will get financial benefits from these insurers. Under this program, IDRA is planning to bring all the foreign Bangladeshi workers under insurance coverage. Most of these workers belong to the poor section. Most of the poor section of the society. We expect that this program will promote financial inclusion through inclusive insurance. The commitment of IDRA is to bring all the workers under insurance coverage. So this year, we made this commitment to AFI regarding Maya Declaration. Only one commitment. And the insurance sector, we are developing it in many ways. And there was immense crisis also in our sector. We are going to solve that. And there are other things we are going to introduce. and new products we are going to introduce. And at the same time, we are also we are promoting national inclusion strategy policy, and insurance is one of the important components of this. We have already made a draft in Bangladesh, and we are going to prepare it finally. And Bangladesh insurance is a factor to this national insurance strategy in the formulation. In a short, I am just closing my deliberations in this point, and if you have any other question, I will reply.
Thank you very much. I think we'll move on first so that everyone has enough time and we have enough time for questions and answers, and then if time permitting, we'll get back. But I think this point about insurance for migrant workers is really important, and I'm sure that there are other people in the audience who actually have large expatriate worker communities in their countries. So that's something that maybe you can get in touch with Bangladesh then on to learn what exactly they're doing in that field, because I think that's also in Latin America definitely an issue. So now moving on to the private sector. So the theme or the name of this panel is Scaling Insurance for Financial Inclusion. And obviously, you aren't able to scale insurance if you don't have the involvement of the insurance industry. So, Mr. Jurgens, from an industry perspective, what's the relevance of inclusive insurance as opposed to just mainstream?
I thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me, first of all. Second of all, thanks for the introductions and key speakers before me, because they gave a wealth of information, and their experience should be used here. And I'm appalled that our regulator hasn't joined the initiative so far, but let me apply for the Insurance Inclusion Initiative. Let me tell you one basic thing, which is probably the vestige of our Soviet past, but of which we can be proud. The things about the inclusion of the poor people and the thing about the inclusion of insurance in general should be divided in my country because of its historical background in two things. First, the whole of the population of the Russian Federation is insured by three major funds, which are state funds. Fund of obligatory medical insurance. No matter how poor you are insured by the state. The Social Security Fund, no matter how low is your wage, but if you're pregnant or you're on a sick list, you'll be taken care of by the state. And the third fund is the pension fund, which also provides for basic subsistence for everybody. So when we talk about the poorest population, of which by UN standards Russia doesn't have at all, these people are taken care of by the state, and that was the Soviet great achievement. Soviet Union didn't have in its system of central planning too much of a motivation for the economic advancement and so on and so forth, and it collapsed because of that. But in terms of social network, it was quite a remarkable achievement of this part of the world. Now, going back to commercial insurance, I would say that the role of the state in making the insurance available to many people cannot be ignored. And today at the plenary session we heard Mr. Mamuta saying about financial education. First of all, you yourself said, okay, we saved $300. Where do we spend it? Do we put it on the deposit in the bank? Do we buy something for ourselves? Or we insure it one way or another? So it's financial education, or in our country, financial enlightenment, I would say, because at the moment, people, because of the Soviet past, because of the safety network which state provides them, they do not think much of insurance, believe me. If worse comes to worse, somehow we will manage, okay? So financial education, financial enlightenment, that's number one thing, and that can only be provided by the state. together with the insurance carriers, and this is the role of insurance association too, of course. Second, technology. Definitely, it was many times mentioned, because if you have all of this in your iPhone or just simple mobile phone, and by one click you can get motor TPL or dwelling insurance or traveling abroad insurance or something of that sort, that's another matter. But as you heard, in the rural areas of Russia, though our mobile phone penetration is close to 90%, still people do not have it. So there's a lot to do, both by the mobile companies, but by the state again. And the third thing, and this is the peculiarity of the Russian Federation with its Soviet past. At the moment, our community, insurance companies, together with the regulators, central bank, we worked out a product which for $3 a year insures your dwelling, be it a house, be it an apartment. But for this, you have to have a penetration. And for penetration, you have to have, on the territory, like 1/7 of the land mass. You have to have cooperation with the governors, who at least should propagandize this. Please spend $3 a year, and at least for $300, for the $30,000, your dwelling will be insured if something happens to you. And this is especially important in the areas like far east of Russia, where the inundations and floods take place every year, or in the south of Russia where earthquakes take place. Okay, so we do not have that cooperation yet. Co-financing of such scheme would give us enormous amount of upside, because not only the people will be safe, but the budget, central budget, we have the so-called reserve budget of the president. Each year they spend $20 billion to restore all those houses which are inundated or flooded or something, and some other kind of a help to those people. Forget about this. If you just co-finance a little bit, but that only can be done regionally. So we try to persuade our governors to help us out, but this co-financing, or even, forget about financing, just propaganda of the product, the knowledge, the outreach, even this is not forthcoming sometimes. Moscow is the vanguard, they did it, and 50% penetration is there. St. Petersburg is thinking about this, other areas, but you have to push, push, and push. So, to sum it up, the reply to your first question: financial education dash enlightenment, technology, and the cooperation between public sector and private sector, and then inclusive insurance, $3, and your dwelling for, that tells you something. So you told me yesterday that I have to be short, number one, and then you'll ask another question, number two, so I shut up here.
Thanks. No, and actually, I think you answered a lot of the second question that I was going to ask you, where you see the best way for the private sector, the insurance association, to work together with the government.
Here I have to say two things. Since they introduced and 2 years ago adopted the law on self-regulating, so-called, that is to say, my association now is obligatory for any insurance company. If you have a license, you have to join. From this point of view, since we are 100% insurance association of everybody, we can be a standard setting. So if we work out a standard of by which all our members have to be inclusive in terms of invalids, and we watch that not in each and every policy there is no discriminatory things. Sometimes happens. Life insurance for invalids is exorbitant. Okay, but that could be, poor people who want to make their life insurance, the life policy happen, and that puts the burden from the state budget and into the hands of the human being. So inclusivity in terms of standards set up by the association, since we're the only one and can, by the law, introduce voluntary standards, which would be nevertheless binding for our members, I think standard setting is the number one thing. And of course, financial education, in which we're heavily involved.
Okay, no, thank you so much. And I think a recurring theme that comes up here is this public-private partnership, and also how commercial insurance can actually complement sort of social insurance and social protection schemes, and how these need to work hand in hand. Also, the negative perceptions of insurance, I think, are definitely not only the case in Russia, but in many other countries as well. So.
But we join initiative, at least on my voluntary basis, okay? And then we will talk to the central bank to officially apply.
Exactly, I was going to say, and we sort of have an unofficial new Maya declaration commitment now, so we'll follow up on that. And so now let's...
You can go for a new declaration.
Exactly. Yeah. No, so let's turn to Karen. So we've been talking about insurance in general so far, but obviously women's world banking is focused specifically on providing access to financial services for women. And I'd like to ask you, basically, what's the point of that? Why do you need to focus specifically on women? And once you've convinced all of us that there is an important point, then how best do you reach women with microinsurance?
Great. So I'm hoping that over the last several years that AFI has been talking to its members enough to show that importance of serving women with financial products and services. Obviously, at the face of it, 50% of the population, if you are excluding them, how are you going to create that economic growth and stability that is part of your mandate? But if you look specifically at the women's hierarchy of needs, and this is where insurance comes into play. So at a very fundamental level, women need asset building products such as savings. Then they need that risk mitigation tool, so that suite of insurance products. And then tools for enterprise growth like credit. And so as policymakers, if you're thinking about the full hierarchy of needs of women and designing policies to make sure that a full suite of products can be offered to them, we can build that greater economic growth and stability. And women themselves are fundamentally extraordinary CFOs of their households. They manage everything on a shoestring. And I sometimes think that the women that we work with on a daily basis, if they were CFOs of companies and those CFOs of companies had to deal with what the low-income women that we work with had to deal with, they would just run away and not want to take that responsibility. But for these women, as the CFOs of their households, it is a very delicate house of cards. And as we've talked about, if an unexpected health emergency comes up, there's an agricultural crisis, someone, the breadwinner in their family, passes away, that house of cards can fall. And insurance then plays such a critical role in helping to maintain that house and make sure that it doesn't fall down. And so as we're designing our national financial inclusion strategies, our policies, you can think about that full suite of her needs and making sure that that risk mitigation part, which sometimes does get forgotten, and you could argue it is the most critical part of her life. And so ensuring that you are doing things like Paraguay's doing and setting up the working groups and working closely with the insurance regulator, making sure that those products can be offered, that's what we absolutely need to be doing. And it will pay off for the woman herself. It will pay off for the private sector, because in the solutions that we've come up with, this has turned into a profitable business venture for the insurance companies. And then it also contributes to the overall economic growth and stability of a market.
And could you just follow up a bit on what types of sort of microinsurance products Women's World Banking is working on?
Yeah, so we started several years ago on a very simple hospital cash policy called Caregiver. And it was designed so that if a woman spends the night in the hospital, she gets a per diem cash payout for every night that she stays in the hospital. And that per diem payout could be used for anything. And this is actually a critical component of this, because what we found in several of the markets that we've done this in, and we've currently rolled this out in Jordan, Egypt, Uganda, Morocco, and Peru. And what we have found is that there's the hidden healthcare costs for a woman. So it's not just her hospital stay. It is additional medicine that she may need. It may mean special food that she needs after her surgery. It may mean childcare. And so having that per diem to use for those unexpected health costs that may not be covered on another scheme that she's on is absolutely critical. The other component to this hospital cash policy is, from the very beginning, we go in and understand what women's needs are and use behavioral science and design to create those solutions. And I don't think this should come as a surprise to anyone in the room, but the one time women prioritize their own health over the health of their spouse, their children, their parents, their other relatives is when they're pregnant. And so making sure that there's maternal health coverage in those policies is also absolutely essential. The delivery mechanism, when you're talking about insurance is complicated. I don't understand parts of my insurance policies that I have. And so for a low-income woman who has lower levels of digital and financial literacy, how do you then explain the value of insurance? And so the marketing and the financial education really needs to be built into that as well. And we found using primarily pictures to help explain it. Don't use insurance terminology like, oh, and your premium is this. It's you'll pay this much per month, and for that one night in the hospital, you'll get that year's money back if you happen to spend the night in the hospital that year. So, moving completely away from anything that could be considered insurance jargon. All of those things need to be built into the design of the product, and frankly, finding an insurance company that is going to be a willing partner and really innovative in designing that's crucial as well.
Thank you very much. So again, another recurring theme is this financial education. That's really important. And I think we've touched upon a lot of issues, and I think we should just stay here for another 2 hours and maybe discuss all of these in detail. No, but since the coffee break will begin in about 15 minutes or so, I'd like to hand over to the audience for some questions, if there are any. Is there? Yep. Yeah, we're just going to see if you could hold on for 1 second, and we'll see if we can get a microphone.
Yes, thanks for the presentations. I have a question for Ernesto. You mentioned that in your microinsurance scheme and also in the agricultural insurance pilot that the premiums are paid by the government, let's say. So it's more like a social protection scheme or something like this. Who is actually managing this? Is there any, let's say, private insurance company or government-run insurance company interested to manage this, or is it, let's say, a state program? And another question for you, Ernesto, is health also included in your strategic approach for poorer populations? And here I would link it to the presentation from Russia. Should the health coverage not actually be taken by the government, by health schemes in the government, instead of, let's say, creating island solutions on micro-insurance health schemes?
Thank you very much. Regarding the first question, as you mentioned, it's a pilot and is taken care by 4 private insurance companies who joined together. They won a public deed organized by the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock, who is the part of the government who is dealing with the whole thing. And of course, they ask for a premium, and the premium is paid up by the government, and that's the key point. So it's not like a subsidy. It's not a subsidy or social aid from the state. Yeah, in a way, it's a subsidy, of course, but it's organized. I mean, it's an private insurance scheme, I would say, paid up by the government. That's regarding the first question. And the other question, yes, a very, very important question. Unfortunately, the majority of the population is not covered by health insurance in Paraguay. Only the workers have an insurance, a social insurance, state insurance. We have an Institute of Social Prevention, which is part of the government, and it covers life and health of the workers, which are a very small part of the population, because there is a huge part of the population who works informally in Paraguay, not under labor contracts, I would say. So it's a difficult issue. I really think that the state should take up this drawback and try to help the population, but considering we have like 20% of the people living in poverty, it's going to be difficult, and it should be dealt with, of course, in a national strategy, I would say, yeah. And that is a point to be taken care of in the next strategy. We have also health insurance, private insurance, of course, but of course that insurance, because it's very costly, is only it covers only a very small part of the population in the upper crest of the society, I'm afraid. So there is still a lot to do in Paraguay regarding insurance. Thank you.
My name is Gokul. I am from Bangladesh, and at present I am working in Insurance Development Regulatory Authority. My chairman is sitting over there. We are very much familiar with some words: microinsurance, microfinance, microcredit. But my question to you, moderator, also, what is the definition? Is there any standard definition of microinsurance? I don't know. In Bangladesh, the amount of insurance that may be micro, but in USA, that amount of insurance that may be teeny insurance or smaller than micro insurance. So, is there any standardization of micro insurance? I first want to know about what is the standard definition of micro insurance.
It's a very easy one because it can be applied to every country. It's microinsurance is insurance for low-income populations, and then each country will have to define specifically for regulatory purposes what exactly is meant by that, and then it can so each country can then introduce a qualitative or quantitative definition. But the simple answer is microinsurance is insurance for low-income populations, as opposed to inclusive insurance, which is insurance on the one hand for low income, but also for other underserved groups. And these could also be small businesses, for example, that don't have access to insurance. So in recent years, there's actually been a trend of going away not speaking exclusively anymore just about microinsurance, but more about inclusive insurance as sort of insurance for everyone that needs insurance. And you had a question.
Thank you. I am Mainuddin Ahmed, Director, Microcredit Regulatory Authority of Bangladesh. You have said those who are low income people, they are they are under micro insurance. That is not the true. It is those who take microfinance loan, they are under microinsurance policy, and they get some subsidy and very low insurance premium. That is the thing, you know.
Okay, so in each country, I assume there's a different definition. So in Bangladesh, what you are just specifically mentioning is credit life insurance, microcredit. Yeah.
Those who gets credit, microcredit.
Those who take or get
Credit, yes.
microfinance or microcredit, that
And they have
they
an
are
insurance
the
linked to it.
people. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in many cases, that's actually how micro insurance starts with credit life insurance for micro
No.
customers.
It's not merged with it. Not with a life insurance. This is for their credit, for their repayment schedule, for their payment capacity.
Okay, okay, and maybe afterwards we can
I think
have
this
another.
micro insurance varies country to country.
Yeah, exactly,
What
absolutely.
is in our country that is may not be applicable in Russia, in America.
Exactly. Are there any other questions? Yes, over there. And last question.
I'm from Guatemala, and we are working in our framework of inclusive insurances. So we started as a microinsurance, and we had this trouble about what was a microinsurance. So my people, they don't read as much. So there is a concern how we can give them insurances because they can read the policy, and also they won't be able to know the coverage that they have, and also because in my country they think that the insurance isn't working well, so that you pay an amount and you never get coverage. So our main concern for now, we don't have an FIS now, but we are building on it, and we have the insurance as part, some part of developing that, is that we will have this new framework. But I think, as far as you have told, that including technology, it will be better for us. But at the same way, we can use the banking agents to make the insurances there. So I wish if someone of you could tell me any kind of experience about people who can read, or how do you manage to make these people to get included into the inclusive insurance. Also, in Latin America, I have seen that they have regulation for microinsurance and also for inclusive insurance. So our biggest concern now is if we could call the framework microinsurance or inclusive insurance.
Would you like to take that one, Ernest?
Yes. Regarding your last question, I would say that I mean, inclusive insurance is broader than microinsurance. I mean, as Anke pointed out, it encompasses also the and underserved part of the population. Yes. And regarding to the first part of the question, if I understood correctly, I think it's just a matter also of educate people. It's educational campaigns, because many people, they don't know about insurance, they don't know about the coverage of insurance. So it is important that the information reach all the population. In the case of Paraguay, for instance, we have a campaign, a national campaign of education, and one of the topics of that campaign is also insurance, and we have like a booklet, and we distribute it to the whole country. So that is a very important part of the strategy also, because that's a part of the strategy. So that could help, I think. And also, of course, the political will, and that's key. To have a strategy, to have people committed to the strategy, as in the case of Paraguay, which is led by the Ministry of Finance, that's an important issue. That's so important because he's also the leader of the committee, of the National Inclusion Strategy Committee. So all these good policies are done within that framework. So I don't know if I, in a way, answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernesto. That was some important points. And I think Women's World Banking also have some very interesting experience in terms of financial education.
Yeah, so I think there's two examples, and they're two actually quite different examples that will just show how the financial education comes into play here. So when we were developing our insurance product in Morocco, when we would be talking to potential women clients and, they would start describing, well, if we had this, that could cover us when we're in the hospital, et cetera, and they would go and talk about this. And we said, well, actually, you already have that product. It is bundled in with your loan from your institution. So there was a distinct, lack of awareness of the specific product and the offerings. So the product itself was very sound. So we actually went in and redesigned all of the education materials so that people became aware that this was part of their solution that they had from the institution. You start to see that claims ratio go up and started to see some real retention for the institution when their clients started to realize that they had this very much value-add service in their offering. Now, on a different side of things, in Cambodia, we were working with a digital insurance product that there was no loan officer involved. It was strictly telephonic sales force. And one of the things we wanted to test was how do we get people to understand the product better? So we went through and simplified all of the language that the call center was using. And what we found, which frankly put the insurance company a little bit like, oh, is this a good result or not? But what we found is that when we changed the language, people had a much higher comprehension of the product, but then we found actually less people taking the product. But on the flip side of that, those people that were taking the product were renewing at a much higher rate. So they were seeing the value of the product. So I think in every market, you're going to see different circumstances of how you need to approach the education depending on what that business model is.
Thank you very much. And if you want, after the panel, we can also discuss. I can also give you some examples from Latin America as well, some other ones. Great. I think I'd say we'll slowly start wrapping up now. And to do so, I'd actually like to ask each of the panelists in just one sentence to sort of summarize what do you think should be the key takeaway for the audience. And we'll start in reverse order this time.
Include insurance in your national financial inclusion strategies.
It's very succinct. Thank you very much.
Private-public partnership in inclusive insurance.
What is your question?
In one sentence, sort of what should be the main takeaway of this panel to the audience?
It should be like this, that insurance for the poor, we should give emphasis on that for the poor group, and so that we can increase the financial inclusion, particularly to the poor classes.
George.
I always think a strategic approach would be very useful for microinsurance, and to bring everybody into the mainstream, you need a good strategy, and a financial inclusion strategy would be very useful to, or microinsurance strategy would be very useful to bring those people into the mainstream insurance.
Keep on strategies to include the poor.
Thank you very much. You are all very succinct. And for me, I think one important aspect is something that Karen said before, that insurance is an essential part of a full suite of financial products, so that you don't have a whole range of financial products if you don't include insurance as well. Now, just a few announcements. There are some of these reports are at the back of the room over there, so feel free to take them. I've also been asked to remind you to evaluate the session on your apps, so please do that. Then please all make Maya declaration commitments on insurance, and if there are any insurance supervisors here in the room, then obviously the Access to Insurance Initiative is always also happy to support. And yeah, AFI will prepare guidance in due course on how best to include insurance in the national financial inclusion strategies, so be on the lookout for that. And with that, I think all that remains to be done is to thank the panel for their insights, for this really nice discussion, and to all of you for coming to our session and not going to the blockchain one. Thanks so much.